What's up YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. I'm James and today we're back working on the 1962 Bel Air Wagon project. So it's been a little while since we worked on this project, so I'll give you a little bit of a recap. But first, if you enjoy cars just as much as I do, then consider clicking the subscribe button so you can follow along with everything that goes on here on the channel. Now in the previous video we had loaded up the body, put it on the lift, lowered it down onto our replacement frame, making it a roller once again for the first time in 4 years. Now it's time to start the reassembly process, starting by connecting the body components to the chassis components. And that's just what we're going to start today, so let's get to it. Well, I'm so glad to have this wagon in the shop because that means I can work on it without competing with the weather. And that's exactly what I've been doing. I've been doing a few little things here and there, and I'm going to show you what I've done so far. Now, as you can see, I have our new brake booster master cylinder setup. This is a 7-inch booster, and you can see we do have a little bit of clearance there, which is good because I definitely want to run these covers. That was the main thing about this brake setup. And I've got our new disc proportional valve on. And I did have to make a couple spacers here on this booster because it was just too much back there. The rod was touching the firewall. It was a lot of figuring out to get this thing on here and to work. And it was a lot of work. And you can see I've got our belt system on, a serpentine system. We've got our tensioner back on the engine, and I've got the alternator bolted up down there at the bottom. We also have the hard lines in the front, ran to both sides. Now we don't have the disc brake swap on just yet. It's over in a box. I'm just waiting to kind of get some new wheels because these are the factory wheels and they won't allow you to put the disc brakes on the car. Well, the wheels won't bolt to the car with the disc brake setup, so I need to get some bigger wheels, maybe some 15s or some 16s, just to kind of roll it around for the time being. And on to the thing that I'm working on now. So if you look right here behind the cylinder head at that hole right there, took me a lot of measurements to get that right, but that is where our engine wiring harness is going to go, and that's what I've been working on. And here's our standalone wiring harness that we're going to use. Now, I went through and I've double checked all the pins from the PCM to all the sensors and even the transmission. And everything looks to be pretty good. There's a couple wires I'm going to have to move around on the transmission plug. For some reason, they're just not in the right spot. Maybe this was for a 4L80 transmission. I'm not sure. So this wiring harness is pretty much ready to go onto the car. All we need to do is feed it through the firewall. So we've got the engine wiring harness ran through the firewall and hooked up to the engine. And if you look, you really can't even tell. And that's exactly the look that I was going for. But if you look back here at the back of the cylinder head, right there's where our main wiring harness comes in. And it does run back there. I'm probably going to tidy that up just a little bit. But as you can see, these fuel rail covers cover most of that nasty wiring up, and it makes it look nice and clean. Now we still do have a couple things to hook up. We have our mass airflow sensor and our air intake temp sensor. These will go on later with the intake. And we do need to make a change. So this is a 98 engine, and this temp sensor is not going to work because it's 3-prong and our wiring connection is 2-prong. So we'll just have to change that out, and that's pretty simple. Moving on to the inside of the car, you can see where our main wiring harness comes in right here. And if you look over there, we've got a ton, and I mean a ton of extra wiring. And what I plan on doing is, if you look right there where that vent is, over in the corner, the black vent, that's where I'm going to run the wiring harness. Right in there. We're going to run it up and over the air box, down. And we're going to make some brackets to mount our PCM in there, so it'll be a nice clean installation. Now here's our heater box, and I did take measurements and make sure that everything was going to clear. And all this area from here to here is wide open behind that box. The box just sits in here and it kind of curves out a little bit. So that's definitely going to work. So a project like this is really time consuming because you're really trying to do something custom and you're trying to figure every little thing out. And it's really time consuming. And another thing that I'm going to have to try to figure out here in the name of safety is our steering linkage. So this car originally came with manual steering, and it had a rag joint that was welded to a metal bar that literally came up here to a universal joint. that was in this area here. Now that was a solid steering shaft, so if you got into an accident or anything happened and this frame rail came back, this whole steering column is going to go that way. The whole thing come back into your face, and you definitely don't want that. So I believe 1967, 1968 they went to a collapsible column, and with this CPP box we needed to change the rag joint anyway, so I decided that I'm going to make this thing collapsible steering, and to do that we're going to have to do a little bit of fabrication. So here's the setup that we're going to use. Now I mentioned the rag joint. The rag joint has different splines from the original, so we needed to replace that rag joint, and I did a little bit of research, and this rag joint here requires no welding. As you can see, it's all one piece, and this is actually for a 67 to 72 Chevrolet truck. It has the correct splines on the end, and it also accepts a double D shaft, as you see here. We're going to use this shaft setup, but on this end to meet the steering column we're going to use this right here. This is a 3/4 inch double D on both sides. Now this will work right here on this end, no problem, but the problem that we're having is, if you look right there, we've got this in the way. So we're going to cut this factory end off, and this is 3/4 inch, so we can make a double D shaft, and that way it'll accept our universal joint. We'll drill some holes for these lock bolts, and it should work out pretty well. After a little bit of cutting and grinding, we have our steering column link finished. As you see, we have our rag joint installed, we have our double D slip shaft, and our universal joint installed onto the factory column. So I'm probably going to end up replacing this double D shaft. As you can see, it's raw steel and it really doesn't look too well. I'll probably end up going with a chrome one or a zinc plated one. Who knows, we'll see. This is perfect for the mock-up, and it's complete. It's in there. We can steer the car if we need to, and we'll need to tighten this up, of course, and put some Loctite and do the final touches later on. So today on the wagon, we're going to be working right here on the front end. We're going to put on our disc brake conversion here on the front, and as you see, there's our rotor and there's our caliper, and here's our bracket. Now originally I had bought this setup and I had it on the old frame before I took the car apart. So this stuff's been sitting for a little while. So you can see that we do have a little bit of surface rust on these rotors that we'll clean up. Now I've got the spindles cleaned up, and this is pretty much an easy bolt-on affair. You've got our steering arm here that needs to be removed because we need to bolt on our bracket, and that's going to require a spacer here, and it's going to require removing this back bolt so we can get our bracket on for our caliper. But outside of that, it's pretty straightforward, just like you would change out anything else. Now these bearings have already been packed inside and out, and we've already got our seal in there, and we'll probably just go ahead and clean this up and repack it anyway. And then you got your castle nut that goes on, and then you torque it down the spec and you're pretty much done. So there you have it. We have our front disc brake set up on, everything's bolted up, everything's torqued down the spec. We even have our brake hoses hooked up and our brake lines. Now we are obviously going to need to do some work on the brake lines because I need to fasten them down to the frame, and I've kind of started working on that up front here. If you look, you can see I fastened those down right here in the front, and we're going to have to do a little bit of extra bending around some of these areas because I want to make it nice and tight, nice and neat. Completing a few of these small, time-consuming tasks is a good start to a long list of small tasks that need to be completed. So until next time, when we will continue on, I'd like to say thank you for watching. Be sure you check out all my videos on all my other projects, and if you're not subscribed, then consider clicking the subscribe button, click the bell so you'll get the notifications, and you can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram.